Happy Halloween! It is Tuesday, and it is also Halloween. And I know that that's not what you guys are excited about. You're excited because it's Tuesday, and that means another book video. Before we get into today's topic that we're going to be discussing, this is my sad attempt at dressing up for this video. I wanted to do something festive, and I have this little Monster Mash t-shirt that I figured I would wear, and then I had some leftover little jeweled cat ears from, I think, when I was in high school, and then I just took some eyeliner and added some whiskers, and so I'm now a cat, if you couldn't tell. But for today's video, first of all, I just want to say I'm shouting out my friend Alex for giving me this book video idea. I was talking to him a few weeks ago and was like, hey, what would be a good book video on Halloween? I've already done reading thrillers for a week, and I've done like very fallish type themed videos, but I didn't have anything that would be good for Halloween. And he told me the awesome idea of talking about the books that I'm scared to read. Now, this could go a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean that I think the book is going to be bad. It has more to do with either it's overhyped and I'm afraid that it is overhyped and I'll read it and it won't live up to the hype. Or it could be a book series that I'm in the middle of and I just haven't had the motivation to start it back up, and I'm afraid it's not going to be as good as it was when I did read it originally. It could also be because it's just a really thick book. Usually, like, you know, bigger books, most of the time it's fantasy, and that could have something to do with the fact that I don't read it just because it's so big and intimidating and I know it's going to take me a really long time to read, so then I put it off until the very last minute. Or it could be because it's a certain author that's very well known and I'm excited to read them, but I am just also terrified that I'm not going to enjoy their writing style, so it's an author I've never read before. Oh, I'm about to already scratch off my whiskers. Or it could just be because the book itself is something that I've never read before. There's a few genres that I'm going to talk about that I'm really intimidated to read. I'm like kind of scared to read just because I don't want to not like it, especially when other people do. So yeah, that's the last thing I'm going to say about that. But let's go ahead and get on into this video. I'm going to be talking about some different books that I am scared to read. So the first book or book series that I'm actually really scared to read is Crescent City. I know in a past video I've already said Sarah J. Maas is one of my all-time favorite authors. She's what got me into reading in high school. Reading her Throne of Glass series, that's my all-time favorite series. I love all of the character development, the world building, everything about her series. I've read ACOTAR, I've read Throne of Glass, like I've read all of her books that she's written so far. However, I have not read the Crescent City duology, or gonna be soon to be trilogy. And the reason why, I think, is because when the first book originally came out and I saw it in Barnes & Noble, I bought it, but I saw how thick it was, and I also knew that this was a series. It was going to be a series, so I didn't want to just read the first book and then if it ended on a cliffhanger, then I would be stuck waiting for the next book. I did that with all of her other series and I hated it. The suspense of waiting, finishing a book as soon as it came out and then having to wait a year or over a year. For some of the books, it was over a year. Waiting for those books to come out so I could finally figure out or find out what was going to happen with some of my favorite characters was infuriating. It was honestly one of the worst things. And I have gotten into the habit where if it's by one of my favorite authors, I will go ahead and buy the book because I know I'm gonna read it and I know I'm gonna love it, but I wait until that whole series is out before I then binge read the entire series. So I went ahead and I bought this book, and then the second book came out, bought that book, and then I found out that the second book ends in a huge cliffhanger, and so I knew immediately, nope, I'm not reading that. I'm not reading it until the third book comes out. Luckily, the third book does indeed come out this January. I'm so excited to finally get into this world. I've also heard that this is one of her more confusing fantasies, like just the type of world and the system of the magic and everything that happens in this book. I've heard that it is way more confusing than her other series. I've read a lot of fantasy books, so I'm not really worried about that. I think I'm just worried it's such a thick book. Both of these are like close to 1,000 pages, I think. Oh no, not even 800 pages, but still, that's a lot. And I just really want to love this trilogy just like I've loved all of her other series. Next up is another series, or I guess trilogy, and that is the Poppy War Trilogy. I've read Poppy War already, and I just have to say that book, I loved it from the very beginning. I loved that book and I loved the pace and everything, but then it just got to the point where like it was dealing with some really heavy topics and there was no romance to be heard of, no romance in sight in that book. And I'm the type of person who loves romance in her book, even if it's just like a smidge. It doesn't even have to be to where they end up together. It could just be like a hint of that romance, and there was none of that in the first book. I did go ahead and buy the second and third book in that trilogy, and because I do want to eventually read these. However, it just took such a long time for me to get through the Poppy War, and I know that a lot of people love this trilogy and I just really want to like it too. So I don't know. It's one of those book series that I feel like in order for me to get back in it, I'm gonna have to read like a quick spoiler thing about Poppy War, because it has been a while since I've read that. And I know there was a lot of information that I learned and I've definitely forgotten since then. I'll have to really hype myself up to get back into those worlds. But I do want to eventually do that because I do want to see what happens with the main character and what happens in this world. So next up, we have Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. This book, honestly, I bought it when I was on vacation because I loved the cover. This is one of the prettiest book covers I have ever seen. And I've heard so much about it, so I definitely wanted to own a copy of this book. However, I am afraid to read it. I'm afraid I'm not gonna like it. I feel like it's gonna be, well, what I've heard is it's very boring and that it's one of those books where it's overhyped. And that's kind of why I'm afraid to read it. I just think it's not going to live up to the hype. And I don't know. I think if I'm going to read this, I'm going to have to really set myself up with low expectations, just thinking, oh, it's just a story. Don't know if it's good or not, and go into it kind of blind that way. So I'm hoping that I can eventually get to this one. But for now, it's just chilling on my shelf. It's not the time. It's not the right season, I don't think. I feel like this is going to be either a summer or spring read for me. So I'm gonna hold on to this and wait until I'm feeling in the mood to read this type of book. For now, it's just gonna collect dust on my shelf until I feel ready. Next up, I have any book that you would consider a classic. I'm the type of person who I want to one day have a whole shelf on my bookshelf that's just dedicated to all of the classics that I've read and enjoyed. And I have read certain classics like in high school for like required reading and things like that. And there are some that I need to buy a physical copy of so that way I have it. But for now, I only have a few. These aren't the only ones I have, but these are the prettier ones that I own. When I go on trips, I like to look at the classics section in any bookstore I go into and try to find like special editions or like just really pretty copies of different classic novels that I know I want to eventually read. And right now, Jane Austen, she's like the one author that I've been searching for like crazy. This is the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition, both of them, and they're just so pretty. I saw these in the store and I absolutely fell in love with them. I have actually watched the movie of both of these books, so Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion. I've watched both of the movies and I really enjoyed them, so that's why I think I'm gonna enjoy the story. I know the book is always better, or most of the time it's always better than the movie, so I'm hoping that that is the case with these books. And what I really like about these books is it has the beveled edge. I took a book binding paper making class in college, and so I've gotten to like create journals and books where we did this with our paper, and I absolutely love that in a book. If I see a book in a bookstore that has that beveled edge, I buy it almost immediately because I think it's so stinking pretty, and you can tell it's not just like, it doesn't look like it's a mass-produced book. It looks more handmade, and it just like looks like there's more effort put into making that book. I do want to eventually read these classics. I think classics are just something that I'm just gonna have to throw in like a seasonal TBR, just throw one classic in each season just to kind of test myself, or just to try to push myself to expand my reading. So this is one genre I really want to get into eventually, and just so I can say I've read these, because I know that these are very influential and I'm a big reader, so why haven't I read all the classics? I don't know. The next books or book series that I am kind of afraid to read or get back into is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And I think the reason why I'm so scared to get in these, first of all, I thought it was a trilogy. Okay, I had bought the first 3 books and I thought it was just a trilogy. I didn't realize it was an ongoing series. And so I had read the first book, loved it. Read the second one, Okay, read the third one, got about halfway through the third one, and found out from someone that it ends in a huge cliffhanger. And you know how I feel about cliffhangers. I'm not about them. I'm not about them. So you can literally see, this is my bookmark from when I originally read this third book. That's my bookmark. I stopped myself, put the book down, and I walked away, and I put it back on my shelf because I knew it was a cliffhanger and there were more books coming out. So I stopped reading this series altogether whenever I found that out, and I have been waiting ever since. And I think this year will be the year that I finally read the books. I don't know, maybe in my winter TBR or in my spring TBR, I'm not sure when. I'm wanting to get back into the series so that way I can finish it, because I do enjoy a lot of the characters in these books. I will say it was very repetitive and kind of annoying. The main character kind of annoyed me. I'm hoping that's not the case with round 2. I'm hoping I can go in with a fresh mind and she doesn't irritate me the whole time. Yeah, so I'm wanting to get back into this. I also want to read the spin-off series about Serafina, I think her name is, or something. I don't know. It's about like the gods and goddesses, I think, that are in this world, that they talk about in this world. So I do want to read that spinoff as well. I think it's a trilogy or a duology or something. But for now, I'm waiting until all the books are out. I think all the books might actually already be out when I think about it. There might be one book left. I don't know. I know there's another book after the War of Two Queens that is out. So there's a 5th book that's out, and I need to buy that so I have it. And the next few books I'm going to be talking about, I don't have physical copies of, but I think eventually one day I will have physical copies of, just haven't gotten around to it yet. But the first series that I do want to read is the Shadowhunters series by Cassandra Clare. I have read the Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Princess, like that trilogy. When I was back in high school, I did read those 3 books and I did enjoy them. However, I'm not a big fan of like love triangles and that kind of thing. So I did buy the new book by Cassandra Clare, Sword Catcher, or I don't know. I'll put a picture of it if I can find it. I did buy that, and I know that's like a whole new world. It's not a spin-off from her past series. It's a brand new fantasy world. So I am excited to read that because I do like Cassandra Clare's writing and I do respect her as a writer. I just am afraid to read her series. It's also a huge series. It has so many books, so many spin-offs, and I'm afraid to get into them. I hope to one day be able to get into them, but we'll see. It's not high on my priority list right now. So for now, that's why I don't own any of her books except for her new one. The next series is Harry Potter. Yeah, I've never read Harry Potter. I was the type of person who grew up and I wasn't allowed to watch Harry Potter. And when I was reading books growing up, I wouldn't read Harry Potter because I wasn't allowed to watch the movies. So why would I read the books? And I didn't watch any of the Harry Potter movies until like my senior year of high school. And that was just because my friends made me watch them. It wasn't because I went out of my way to watch them. So I'm not the type of person who like every fall or Christmas season, I'm whipping out Harry Potter and I'm rewatching all of those movies. No, that's not me, sadly. There's other stuff I would rather watch than Harry Potter. I do want to eventually read it just to say I've read it, but that's really not a good reason to want to read a book, is just to say you've read them. I know my brother's read all of them, so maybe he can convince me. Zach, you're gonna have to convince me to read Harry Potter eventually. The next genre I'm going to talk about, so not book, genre, is the whole sci-fi genre. So a lot of sci-fi books, it's like a higher fantasy type world sometimes, and I think I could get into sci-fi. However, a lot of sci-fi books don't have romance in them, and they also deal with a lot of very complicated vocab. I've heard a lot of people say Red Rising, that the world building and just everything that's happening in there is very confusing and it makes you feel very dumb. And I think that's part of the reason why I haven't gotten into sci-fi a whole bunch. I think Poppy War is considered sci-fi, and I was able to read that and get through that. However, it wasn't like something that I was loving the entire time. I think that the content of it, the very sciencey type stuff, it just is really hard to read. I like sci-fi movies. Don't get me wrong. I love sci-fi movies. But books, when you're reading the actual words and trying to like sound it out in your head and everything, it's way more confusing. Whereas if you're watching something, you understand what's going on. Whereas if you're reading it, it's a lot more difficult to follow. So I think that's part of the reason why I'm very nervous to start reading more sci-fi books. Maybe when I'm older, I'll enjoy it because I'll just be smarter and I'll understand it better. But for now, I'm gonna stick with my fantasies. My fantasies love me and I love them. So it's a mutual love relationship with fantasies. I think I'm just gonna stick with that for now. But eventually, I will get into sci-fi. I'm gonna tell myself that eventually. And the last book or author, actually, that I'm afraid to read is Stephen King. I am terrified to read Stephen King just because I've heard a lot of his books. He deals with so much dark matter, and a lot of his books just deal with so much dark matter and dark content that it's really hard for me to get into his books. I've watched a lot of his movies, or a lot of the books of his that were turned into a movie. So like I kind of know already going into them. However, I just think that I'm not a big horror fan. I'm just not into it. I think since reading thrillers for a week, when I read The Troop, that gave me a little hint or little taste of what Stephen King reading his books would be like. And I can't say I love it. Sadly, I know not all of his books are horror. I think maybe if I read Billy Summers, I know I've heard that that's more of like a detective, like mystery type book. It's not really a scary book. I think I could get into that maybe, and that'll help me ease me into his writing style. We'll see. But yeah, he's like the one author that I do want to eventually read, but I'm kind of afraid to. Mainly because I'm afraid of his writing. Like the content itself is scary, but also because I don't want to not like his writing. And that is it for all the books that I am scared or intimidated to read. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you got a brief glimpse into my psyche and why I am leaning towards certain books or why I go away from certain books. If you have read any of these books that I just mentioned, please comment down below so that way I know I can hear your thoughts and if I should put them at the front of my TBR, because some of these books I'm just afraid to read them and I feel like I need that extra push in order to get me to be motivated to read them. So if you've read them, please comment down below and give me your thoughts and opinions. And thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Hopefully this was fun. This is something different, especially since it's Halloween. I wanted to do something more festive just for you guys, but I love you all so much and I'll see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye!